Love, Crime, and Bullets. The Story of Bonnie and Clyde. Story of Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow is one of the most famous outlaw legends in American history, set during the harsh years of the Great Depression. Bonnie Parker was born in 1910 in Texas, a small, bright young woman who loved writing poetry and dreamed of becoming an actress. Clyde Barrow, born a year earlier, grew up in a poor farming family near Dallas, Texas. Life had been hard for Clyde, and by his teenage years, he had already begun drifting into petty crimes like stealing cars and small robberies. The two first met in 1930 at a friend's house in Dallas. According to people who knew them, there was an instant connection between them. They quickly became inseparable, but the relationship was interrupted almost immediately when Clyde was arrested and sent to prison. Bonnie remained loyal to him during his time behind bars, visiting him and writing letters. Some accounts even claim she once smuggled a gun to him that helped him escape. Though Clyde was eventually recaptured, the experience hardened him, and when he was released in 1932, he returned to Bonnie, determined never to live a normal life again. Together they began a life on the run, traveling across the central United States committing robberies. Their crimes were not always the glamorous bank heists later portrayed in movies. Often they robbed small stores, gas stations, and rural banks for small amounts of money. Over time, they formed a small gang that included Clyde's older brother Buck Barrow and Buck's wife Blanche Barrow. The group moved constantly through states like Oklahoma, Missouri, and Texas, stealing cars and avoiding the police. During their crime spree, several violent shootouts occurred, and multiple police officers and civilians were killed. Despite the violence, the newspapers of the time often turned Bonnie and Clyde into folk heroes. America was struggling through the Great Depression, and many people were angry at banks and authorities. When police discovered photographs of Bonnie posing playfully with guns and cigars in one of their abandoned hideouts, images spread across newspapers and helped create the image of a rebellious young couple living dangerously and defying the system. In reality, life on the run was brutal. They slept in stolen cars, rarely had enough money, and were constantly moving to avoid capture. In 1933, Bonnie was severely injured when their car crashed in a fiery accident, leaving her with a badly burned leg that made it difficult for her to walk for the rest of her life. Even so, she continued traveling with Clyde as the manhunt for them intensified. Eventually, Texas authorities assigned former Ranger Frank Hammer to track them down. Hammer carefully studied their movements for months, learning their habits and predicting where they might appear next. He discovered that the couple frequently visited acquaintances in Louisiana, and he assembled a group of officers to set a trap. On the morning of May 23, 1934, officers hid along a quiet rural road in Bienville Parish, Louisiana. When Bonnie and Clyde drove down the road in a stolen Ford V8, the officers recognized the car and opened fire immediately. The ambush lasted only seconds, but more than 100 bullets tore through the vehicle. When the gunfire stopped, both Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow were dead inside the car. Bonnie was just 23 years old, and Clyde was 24. Their deaths ended a 2-year crime spree that had terrified law enforcement across several states. Yet instead of fading into history, their story only grew more famous. Crowds gathered to see the bullet-riddled car, and thousands attended their funerals. Over the decades, books, songs, and films, especially the 1967 movie Bonnie and Clyde, turned them into symbols of rebellious love and outlaw romance. Whether seen as ruthless criminals or tragic young lovers, the legend of Bonnie and Clyde remains one of the most enduring crime stories in American history. If you liked this story, hit follow so you don't miss our next upload.